Mr. Chair.
Ready to go.
Yep, you've been on quiet there, sitting next.
I can't see myself on TV3.
It's not on TV3.
Well, welcome back to the reconvened meeting. We are starting on item L6 on page 42 of our agenda. The unconfirmed decisions only document.
Chair. Well, it's a little bit more than that because there is some description of what was discussed and what was said. And in that context, on page 46 of the agenda and page 4 of the minutes, I just think the second sentence in the bottom paragraph again doesn't, I don't quite understand it, or I think it could be worded more clearly. The sentence currently reads, he had discussed gradient and an additional point around more extensive agricultural setting being a continuum to ensure it is recognised that it is not one or the other. And Mr. Campbell
Page 46.
had the conversation with Councillor Blackler. So, David, can you think of a clearer way of saying that? Because its meaning isn't immediately clear to me, the sentence's meaning, I mean.
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins. The discussion was around reflecting in the chapter wording that extensive agriculture, there's a continuum, from the valley floor up to the higher slopes, and that often the extensive agricultural activity had other benefits of biodiversity, etc. So it was kind of a roundabout discussion and when we got to that point, but that's what he was stressing needed to be.
So if it read, he had discussed gradient and including in the chapter an additional point around more extensive agricultural settings being a continuum to ensure they are recognised not to be simply one or the other. Would that make it clear?
Yeah, I think it fleshes out kind of the greater intent. Yeah.
Mr. Chair, if you'd accept that amendment, I'll move the adoption or the confirmation of the minutes of the DPR subcommittee meeting conducted on the 5th of December 2024 with amendment as agreed.
Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Linwood. I'll now put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. We now move on to a resolution to exclude the public.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, before we do that, I've given you some suggested wording for a motion that would be done in public. I'm wondering whether we could do that at this time.
Thank you for the reminder, Mr. Mayor. The Mayor has made a suggestion that this subcommittee could make a recommendation that if council adopts the district plan for notification, it also instructs officers to give clear notice to the public that it will submit to council for any changes made by central government standards, and that such submissions are consistent with making rules and overlays as permissive as possible to protect existing rights of property owners, as it will be intended by such legislation.
Can you just read those again? I think I understand what we're being asked to do, but is the mayor, well, perhaps if I ask the mayor a question, do you want us to, the committee separately from officers to submit on the plan?
No, look,
Or-
we've talked about, the change in legislation. We're faced with, situations such as ORC where they've pushed on and the government has given them a rap over the knuckles and all the rest of it. But, the idea is that, we have talked about, officers making a submission to our own plan to reflect the legislation if and when it does come into being. So this is just formalising that and giving some reassurance, both to the public, but also to the minister or ministers involved that, that we want to comply with whatever's in place, but they need to put it in place. So the wording is that the District Plan Review Subcommittee recommends that if council adopts the district plan for notification, then it also instructs officers to give clear notice to the public that it will submit to council for any changes made by central government to standards, NESs or MPSs created. And two, that such submissions are consistent with making rules and overlays as permissive as possible to protect existing rights of property owners as intended by such legislation.
I'd be happy to second that with one very minor amendment if you were willing to entertain it. I think the word "it," the reason I was a bit puzzled about the first bit was I thought you meant the word "it" referred to the subcommittee. If that has changed to council, so it is clear that we're recommending that council do that, I'd be happy to second it.
Yeah. So we can change.
And then
it that
council.
council also instructs.
Yeah.
I'm happy with that.
All right. Mr Campbell?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mayor Kircher. So I guess we've discussed a little bit this in the past, and there's some discussion in the report to council next week. I guess, and first thoughts are that, yes, we can submit or put forward changes to our plan that would be needed if any higher level documents are changed nationally. We would do that consistent with those documents. So if they made things more permissive, that's fine. If they didn't, we'd also have to comply with them anyway. So I don't think the resolution precludes putting in standards that might be tighter than what we've got. Sometimes the national level instruments, and I'm thinking particularly ones around electricity transmission, actually set a higher bar than the district plan for the likes of hydropower poles, for instance. So a lot of the time people are caught by the national level instruments, not our district plan. So sometimes there's a bit of a difference there. If it's required by a national level document, people comply with that. If this district plan is more lenient, then that's fine. They don't need a consent from us, but they might need it under a national document. So there are instances where it goes both ways. I guess during that submission period, we would see what comes through, and some of those changes may actually come later on in the piece. But again, we can still make those changes either as directed by the national level instruments, or they just kick in anyway and people have to comply with them like they do now for the soil contamination ones, that type of thing.
Yeah, I think it does work both ways, that it can be read that actually we still want them as permissive as it can, but it does have to reflect the legislation. So fine with making sure that it is as flexible on that.
The bottom line, I think it sends a signal both to our ratepayers and to the government of the day that we are cognizant of changes possibly coming, and we're prepared to work with them as possible. No further discussion. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried.
Removed to go public and
We haven't.
Before we do that, Mr. Chair, councillor Hopkins foreshadowed a motion earlier. And if that needs to be in public, because once we go to public excluded, we can't come back onto the live stream. So does councillor Hopkins want to do his motion that he was foreshadowing? Might have been about something to do with the difference between decisions only
Oh, well,
documents.
it's done. We did it, remember? We
Okay.
voted on it.
So
So,
you don't have anything else? I just wanted to check. Okay.
I mean, if you remember, I said I'd do that at the end. Mr. Palmer said better to do it at the start.
All right, so we now have a resolution to exclude the public.
Mover and seconder, please.
So I'll move from the chair. If councillor Linwood's going to second that, all those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. So we move on to,
Just say goodbye to your audience.
oh, and thank you for anyone out there in Never Never Land who's been watching us. Thank you for your tolerance and interest in what is some very important decisions for our community.
Mr. Chair, I'm just, I suspect that people might have been watching today, if they were at all, and thinking, what a convoluted waste of time. But in point of fact, it's not. What we have done today is an absolutely essential part of the journey towards notification of the plan. Now, had these minutes been available earlier, we might have spent 2 or 3 minutes at the beginning of any given meeting discussing one particular set. But it has taken a lot longer today simply because we've been going through so many sets of minutes, and perhaps people's recollections and memories and issues of that nature are a bit less clear than they might have been if events were fresh in our minds. But I do want to thank everyone who's allowed the meeting today to actually get everything as right as humanly possible, and also everyone who's contributed to getting the documents to us today in a manner that we could consider and that a manner that can be seen publicly to demonstrate that we have been giving this detailed and careful consideration. And I think there has been concern about the absence of minutes, and people have made the point that they have to be available before the notification process commences. That's a moot point, but it certainly is preferable that they are. And I think today we've achieved a very significant body of work, laborious, detailed and painstaking as it is. And I do thank those who've made these minutes available for our consideration.
Thank you, councillor Hopkins. Mr. Campbell, did you want to say something?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Also, reiterating councillor Hopkins' thanks. I'd also like to thank both elected members for spending the time looking at them, going through them, being thorough, seeking to clarify things that were said, because it is important that it's correctly captured. Also like to thank the governance advisor for lots of extra work last minute to kind of get these ready, and also the team with the district plan area with Zara, Katrina, Rachel, etc., that have jumped in and looked at these for us. Been a big job, but it is important to get them right, and also throughout this last 13 months go through and reflect the changes in the chapters that are coming to council. So yeah, it's been a huge process because we have had that extra step with the draft process. It has required more work, put people under a lot more pressure, but hopefully in the end it's resulted in a better outcome. There'll be things that people still want to change, and that's, you know, open for the next process to deal with that. But really just, reiterate councillor Hopkins' messages and thank the team for all their hard work, and especially governance advisor for pulling away for hours and hours on these. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So I will now wish adieu to those of you online as we move into a public excluded session. I have a motion from the chair, seconded by councillor Linwood, that we move into public excluded. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried.